Hello and welcome to Cognitive Drift. The word miracle has a strange effect on us. It carries a kind of emotional weight that feels bigger than reality, something that makes us pause, even if just for a second, to wonder if the rules of the universe took a break. But what is a miracle really? Most people define it loosely, something extraordinary that can't be explained by natural laws, something so unlikely or so perfect that the only explanation left is some kind of divine intervention. That's a powerful claim because if a miracle is something that can't be explained by nature, then by definition, it must be supernatural. It steps outside science, reason, and observation, and leans into the realm of belief. And belief is where things get blurry. Let's start with something simple. If someone says they saw a dog with wings fly across the sky, most of us wouldn't accept it at face value. We'd ask questions. What did they see exactly? Could it have been a drone, a hallucination, a misunderstanding? But when the claim is religious in nature, like a bleeding statue or a sudden healing, people hesitate to question it in the same way. Why is that? Because miracles don't just claim that something unusual happened. They usually come with a built-in story, a meaning, a message from a higher power. And when people are desperate, grieving, hopeful, or afraid, they don't want to just understand an event. They want that event to mean something. That emotional pull is what gives miracles their staying power. But just because something feels meaningful doesn't make it true. There's a reason no miracle has ever been verified under controlled conditions. No amputated limb has regrown instantly on camera. No prayer has ever been proven to change the laws of physics. The kinds of miracles people believe in tend to happen in private, undocumented, unverifiable settings. They're stories passed around, anecdotes remembered differently with time. The issue isn't that people are lying. It's that human perception is unreliable and our memories are even worse. We misremember things constantly, especially things we experienced while emotional. The brain edits reality all the time, not because it's broken, but because it's built to prioritize meaning over precision. That's why eyewitness testimony is the least reliable form of evidence in court, and yet it's the most common form of evidence when people talk about miracles. Stories like "my aunt was sick and the doctor said there was no hope, but then she got better overnight," those are moving, they're personal, but statistically unexplained recoveries happen. Not often, but often enough that we can study them. There are misdiagnoses, spontaneous remissions, placebo effects, and then, of course, luck. The difference is, when something unexpected happens in a hospital, doctors call it a statistical outlier. When it happens in a church, it's called a miracle. But what about the big miracles? The ones that are supposed to be historical fact, like parting seas, turning water into wine, raising the dead. That's where things get more interesting. Because these are not just personal stories. They're claims about history, about what happened in the real world. But when you look closer, they have a pattern. They're described only in religious texts, written decades or centuries after the events supposedly took place. In languages most modern believers can't even read. We wouldn't take an ancient text about dragons or gods turning into animals as literal truth, but for some reason, miracles get a pass. There's something telling about the way miracles work. In the past, they were massive, dramatic, world-shaking. But as technology improved, as cameras, science, and medical understanding advanced, miracles became more subtle, less physical, more emotional. They moved from the physical world into the private experiences of individuals. It's almost like the more ways we have to verify reality, the fewer miracles we find. And that makes sense, doesn't it? Because if a god were truly performing supernatural acts that break the laws of nature, we wouldn't need secondhand stories, we'd see it. And yet, we don't. This doesn't mean people who believe in miracles are stupid. Far from it. Many are intelligent, thoughtful, and sincere. But belief isn't just about intelligence. It's about need. People believe in miracles because they want to live in a world where the impossible is possible, where death isn't the end, where justice exists even when it's invisible, where someone, somewhere, is watching over us. That's a comforting thought, but that comfort doesn't make it true. If miracles were real, in the way most people mean literal interruptions of natural law, then we should expect to see them happen just as often under observation as when no one is watching, but that's not what we find. When miracles are claimed today, they tend to happen in remote places, or to people who are already part of a particular religious tradition. They rarely happen to skeptical observers, or under neutral testable conditions. There's a pattern here, and it tells us something important. A miracle, more often than not, fits the expectations of the culture where it's reported. In Catholic areas, people see the Virgin Mary in toast or tears on statues. In Hindu regions, idols drink milk or bleed sacred oil. In Pentecostal churches, people speak in tongues and claim divine healings. In Islamic contexts, people find Allah's name spelled in the clouds. Different gods, different miracles, all seemingly proving completely contradictory religions, but a miracle that proves every religion really proves none of them. It's easy to dismiss the miracles of other cultures as folklore or superstition, but hard to question the ones we grew up with. That's how bias works. We're not looking at the evidence objectively, we're filtering it through what we already want to believe. And belief is powerful. In fact, the placebo effect, the belief that you're being healed, can cause real changes in the body. Pain relief, blood pressure drops, even measurable changes in brain chemistry, not because of divine intervention, but because of expectation. And sometimes, hope is enough to create a feeling of transformation. It's not fake, but it's not a miracle either. What we call miracles often say more about the people experiencing them than about the universe itself. When someone's cured after 1,000 people pray, we call it divine. But when 1,000 people pray and nothing happens, we call it God's will. Either way, the belief survives. It's a classic example of unfalsifiability. No outcome can disprove the belief because every outcome is folded into the narrative. That's not how we evaluate truth in any other area of life. Imagine if a car mechanic worked that way. If your car broke down and he said, "I fixed it with invisible magic," and if it still doesn't run, that's part of the magic too. You'd walk away. But when it comes to religion, those kinds of explanations are treated as profound. There's something deeply human about the desire to believe in miracles. It's not just about proof, it's about purpose. The idea that there's something beyond us, something watching, guiding, protecting, especially in moments of crisis. But the danger is that belief in miracles can also lead us away from action. If we think prayer will end a famine, we might donate less. If we think a healing is supernatural, we may stop searching for real medical answers. If we believe miracles are happening in war zones, we might turn away from the horror, thinking it's all part of some larger plan. In that sense, the belief in miracles isn't neutral. It has consequence. It can discourage critical thinking, reduce accountability, and distract us from the real, messy, complicated ways the world actually works. And sometimes it gets darker. There have been cases, many actually, where people died because they believed a miracle would save them. Parents refusing medical care for their children, cancer patients abandoning treatment for faith healers, entire communities chasing signs and wonders, pouring money into churches and televangelists who promised miraculous breakthroughs. None of that is harmless. When someone sells you a miracle, they're not selling you reality, they're selling you certainty. And certainty is seductive, but a healthy mind should be more curious than certain. It's okay to not know. It's okay to admit that life is filled with randomness, coincidence, and the unknown. That doesn't make it meaningless, it makes it real. And sometimes reality is enough. We live on a tiny rock orbiting a star in a galaxy among billions, and yet here we are, conscious, aware, capable of asking questions like this? Isn't that already amazing? We don't need supernatural events to feel awe, or to feel connection, or purpose, or compassion. Those things exist right here without breaking the laws of nature. In fact, what makes them beautiful is that they don't break the laws, they arise from within them. When a child survives against all odds, it's a testament to biology, science, medicine, and yes, sometimes luck. When someone overcomes an addiction or depression or trauma, it's a triumph of the human mind, not a lightning bolt from above. That doesn't make it any less powerful. If anything, it makes it more. One of the quiet truths about miracles is that we only ever notice the hits. We forget the misses. For every story of a plane crash survivor who walked away and called it a miracle, there are dozens who didn't make it, and their stories go untold. We don't call those miracles, even though the odds were the same. We remember the outlier, the exception, and we call it divine. It's a kind of mental shortcut, one we all take whether we realize it or not. It's called selection bias. We pay attention to things that stand out and ignore the rest. And when we only look at the success stories, the world can start to look like it's full of magic, when really it's full of patterns. There's also a problem of scale. When something statistically rare happens, people often assume it's a miracle. But with billions of people on Earth, even incredibly unlikely things will happen all the time. Someone dreams of an old friend and wakes up to a message from them. Someone finds exactly the money they need on the sidewalk. A patient is given a 1 in a million chance to live and they live. That's not supernatural. That's statistics playing out across a massive sample size. But because we experience life one person at a time, it feels personal. It feels like the universe is speaking directly to us. And that's understandable, but it doesn't mean it's true. There's also something else going on beneath all of this, and it's easy to miss. Our brains are meaning-making machines. We see patterns even when they aren't there. We connect dots that were never meant to be connected. That's how we get conspiracy theories, superstitions, and yes, miracle claims. When a coincidence is emotionally charged, we treat it differently. We remember it, repeat it, build stories around it. It becomes part of a belief system, a narrative, even a testimony. But if we step back and look at the full picture, we see a different kind of truth. Not one built on rare emotional moments, but one built on careful observation, consistency, and repeatable evidence. That's what separates science from superstition. Because if something is real, it doesn't hide. It doesn't only show up to the faithful or in the shadows or under just the right emotional conditions. It shows up everywhere, consistently, for anyone who looks. And miracles don't. That's why even religious institutions quietly admit this. The Catholic Church, for example, has a long and detailed process for approving miracles. But most claims are rejected. Even they know how easy it is to be fooled by emotion, psychology, or fraud. And fraud does happen. There are countless cases exposed over and over again of fake miracle healers, rigged stunts, planted audience members, and manipulative shows designed to stir up emotion and encourage donations. They prey on hope, on grief, on the human desire to believe, and that's what makes it so tragic, because the need behind the belief is real. People want to be healed, want to be seen, and want to feel less alone. And that need gets wrapped in the language of faith and miracles, not because people are foolish, but because they're desperate for something beyond what this world seems to offer. But that's exactly why honesty matters. Because giving people false hope can be worse than giving them none. The truth is, reality is already astonishing, already overwhelming, already full of complexity and wonder. We don't need to add magic to it to make it meaningful. What we call a miracle is often just a name we give to something we don't yet understand, or don't want to accept. But giving it that name doesn't make it real. It makes it comforting, and comfort isn't the same as truth. In fact, most of the progress we've made as a species, in medicine, in physics, in understanding the brain, has come from not accepting supernatural answers, from pushing beyond "it's a miracle" and asking why, how, what's really going on. And that questioning, that refusal to stop at wonder, is what has actually improved lives. We don't get vaccines by praying harder. We don't build bridges that stay up by reading scripture. We don't cure disease, land on the moon, or understand the brain by assuming invisible forces are behind everything we don't yet grasp. Progress begins where miracle thinking ends. That doesn't mean there's no mystery left in the world, far from it. There's still so much we don't know about consciousness, about the universe's origins, about life itself. But the unknown doesn't need to be filled in with stories of divine interruption. Sometimes admitting we don't know yet is the most honest thing we can say. And that's the real divide, not between belief and disbelief, but between people who are comfortable with not knowing and those who need certainty, even if that certainty is built on shaky ground. The idea that the universe makes exceptions, that it suspends its rules for special people or certain prayers, has always raised more questions than it answers. Why would an all-powerful being heal one child and not another? Why would a divine force intervene to help someone find their car keys, but not stop a tsunami? Why are miracles so often small, subjective, and unverifiable, and so rarely dramatic, public, and undeniable? If miracles were real in the supernatural sense, we wouldn't need stories to believe in them. We'd see them ourselves. But we don't. And when something only exists in the stories people tell, and never in the world we all share, that's a clue. It doesn't mean people are lying, but it does mean we should be cautious about confusing hope with fact. Our brains evolved to find patterns, to build meaning from chaos. It's part of what makes us human. But it also makes us vulnerable to seeing miracles where there are none. Because here's the thing, every time someone survives a deadly disease and we call it a miracle, we're ignoring all the people who died despite doing everything right. Every time we point to a disaster survivor as proof of divine protection, we're overlooking the dozens or hundreds who didn't make it. That's not just bad reasoning, it's quietly cruel. Because it suggests that those who weren't saved just didn't have enough faith, or weren't chosen, or somehow deserved less. And that's the uncomfortable implication beneath many miracle stories. That some lives matter more than others. That a higher power selectively helps, but doesn't explain why. It's hard to square that with any meaningful definition of justice or love. So maybe the better question isn't, do miracles happen? Maybe the question is, why do we want them to? What is it we're really looking for? Is it certainty? Is it comfort? Is it a break from the feeling that the universe is vast and impersonal and that we're just tiny creatures spinning on a rock? Because if that's the fear, it's worth asking whether miracles truly solve it or just distract us from it. There's a quiet dignity in accepting the world as it is, unpredictable, sometimes unfair, often beautiful, without assuming that every lucky moment has cosmic meaning. And when something truly extraordinary happens, instead of calling it a miracle, maybe it's enough to just say, that was rare, that was powerful, that was human. Because what people often mean by miracle is simply, I can't believe this happened. But surprise isn't proof of the supernatural. It's a reminder of how little we understand. And understanding grows best when we don't rush to fill the gaps with divine explanations. It's tempting to believe there's something watching over us, something that bends the rules now and then, just to remind us we're not alone. But if the laws of nature could be broken at any moment, for any reason, how would we ever know what to trust? What we call reality depends on consistency. If gravity only worked some of the time, if the sun rose differently depending on who prayed harder, if illness vanished at random, the world would be unlivable. We survive and thrive because the universe follows patterns. And when those patterns are interrupted, we don't throw up our hands and say miracle, we investigate. And that's how we found out what causes lightning, what spreads disease, what makes the planets move, what turns cells into cancer, and what can heal them. Every one of those answers once belonged to the gods, until we pulled back the curtain. And when we did, we didn't lose wonder. We deepened it. Because real awe doesn't come from magic. It comes from realizing how intricate the real world is, how fragile life is, how much has to go right for us to be here at all. We don't need to believe the universe is rigged in our favor to feel grateful. We don't need supernatural signs to recognize the beauty in survival, or recovery, or connection. A child being born isn't a miracle because it defies science. It's a miracle because it happens because of science and nature. And the long, complicated, dangerous chain of events that had to go right for it to work, a heart restarting after cardiac arrest, isn't divine. It's medicine, preparation, skill, and yes, maybe a little luck. And luck isn't magic, it's probability. When we call something a miracle, we often mean it touched us, moved us, caught us off guard, made us feel like we witnessed something beyond explanation. But sometimes, the real explanation is just unlikely but real, and that's more meaningful than magic. Because once we accept that we live in a natural world, governed by consistent rules, we can stop hoping for special treatment and start working to help each other. No more waiting for miracles. We become the ones who act. We become the hands that save, the minds that cure, the people who show up when it matters. Not because a higher power whispered in our ears, but because we chose to care. And that is enough. That's how real change happens. Not by divine intervention, but by human attention. So the next time someone asks if miracles actually happen, maybe the answer isn't yes or no. Maybe the better answer is they don't need to, because the world, exactly as it is, already gives us more than enough reason to be astonished and more than enough responsibility to act.